Okay, we welcome you all. We'll get officially started here. It is wonderful to see everyone again, and we welcome you back to our Power Up series. I see some familiar names on the participant list, and I think some new ones too, which is great. As you know, this series is all about sustainability, keeping our programs thriving well beyond grant funding. You see the official title on the screen, Sustaining Residencies, Local Funding, Staffing Models, and Other Creative Solutions. We've been focused on our first session and this one too on the local funding piece. So this morning we are picking up where we left off in session one when we looked at how the LCAP can support long-term financial sustainability for all of our great programs. And many of you also spent some time reviewing your own LCAP document during the scavenger hunt activity, which I know was a very helpful, insightful activity. Today, we're going to build on that experience from our last meeting by hearing from programs who are exploring how their LCAP aligns with their residency sustainability plan. And we'll also be joined by an LCAP expert who will share additional insights and guidance. So thank you for joining us, and we're excited to keep learning together. As a reminder, this Power Up series is a collab between SRTAC, the statewide Residency Technical Assistance Center, and TRL, the Residency Lab. So together we are sharing tools, ideas, and strategies to support residency programs across the state. Of course, we'll take a quick moment to introduce ourselves. My name is Javier Baca, and I am the Southern Region Hub Lead for SRTAC, and I'll send it over to Amy.
Hi, everyone. Amy Bennett. I work as an SR-TAC coordinator out of the Santa Clara County Office of Education, and I will turn it over to Heather.
Good morning. Happy Monday. Dr. Heather Michelle. I am the director of the Residency Lab. I'm here collaborating with my esteemed colleagues from SR-TAC and just excited to be here and share some more information about financial sustainability. And with that, I do want to spend a little bit of time on the 10 key characteristics of effective teacher residency programs. You may not know, but we recently updated our 10 characteristics. So what you have here are an updated list of 10 characteristics. It's linked there in the PowerPoint. As a reminder, these characteristics serve as a common framework for all residency programs at various levels of implementation. They really exemplify the scope and complexity of residency program work, right? It is complex when we think about effective implementation, and that's reflected in these 10 standards or characteristics. They center equity and justice in all aspects of our implementation. They form all the basis of support and assistance for residency programs when the Residency Lab and SR-TAC come together to plan and create offerings for the field. We start with these characteristics, and a lot of our offerings support them. And then lastly, they appear as an appendix in all CTC requests for applications. So they are a critical piece of, again, the CTC application process. Today, I do want to call out the characteristic that we'll be focusing on, and that is financial sustainability. So this specific Power Up series is just focusing on that characteristic. I also wanted to remind you all, if you have not seen or gotten into your program folder. So each program across the state of California has their own program folder. In that folder are module workbooks that are linked to our residency module activities, the workbooks and the specific slides that support the activities in those workbooks. There is a running notes page in your program folder, and of course the planning tool that we often revisit and fill out when we come together in our virtual or in-person offerings. I remind you of this folder and this specific resource because it really is a way to document your work in the residency space. It kind of addresses, that issue sometimes of there being turnover or different changes that happen in leadership. And if you have specific artifacts like this program folder filled out and utilized, like the planning tool, like the notes, it's easy for someone to come in and pick up and continue the work where you left off. And so again, in terms of this idea of sustainability, really keeping track of your progress and creating documents that serve your sustainability for the long term. And so I want to make sure that you're aware of those and that you're getting in those on a consistent basis. And we'll have an opportunity to do that a little bit more today as we move through today's session.
All right, so we want to take a quick minute just to kind of share the overarching themes of each of the 4 Power Up sessions at a glance. So in October, as Javier mentioned, we started by grounding our work in the sustainability framework, setting a shared foundation for what sustainability means in the context of educator residencies, and then learning some LCAP essentials from our partners at San Diego County Office of Education, really breaking down how funding priorities and local goals can intersect. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into LCAP implementation, and we'll feature some program spotlights from across the state, really showcasing how different LEAs are aligning their residency programs to their local goals and funding streams. And then in January, we'll focus on leveraging paid LEA roles, looking at sustainable staffing models, and highlighting how LEAs are hiring their residents into paid roles like paraeducator or substitute teacher positions. And you'll get to hear from field experts who've implemented those models successfully. And then our final session for the year will explore creative and emerging funding approaches being used across the field. We'll collaborate to identify practical strategies that you can adapt and apply. And really, the overall goal of all of this work this year is to leave you with a toolkit of sustainable funding options to support your programs long term. And so looking at today's focus, our session today is really designed to help you explore effective practices and make meaningful connections between residency design and your district priorities. So you'll have the opportunity to learn from other residency programs, really examining strategies and approaches that have supported their sustainability and impact. Then we'll connect those insights to your own context, taking some time to reflect on connections between the featured programs and your own district's goals and priorities. And throughout the session, we'll keep it interactive and reflective with time built in for discussion and collaboration. So ultimately, today's about learning from others, identifying what resonates for your own program, and really deepening the connection between residency design and local systems of support. And we have created a one-page resource that we'll share in the chat. This will be a living document. We'll continue to kind of update and revisit it each time we meet this year. But in it, you'll find copies of the slide decks, the core resources, such as the characteristics that Heather was just mentioning, as well as links to the regional program planning folders. And then each session, when we come together, we'll have materials specific to that particular session. And so next to where it says resources for session 2, that's where you'll find everything that we're referencing for today. And I will turn it over to Heather. Oops, you're muted, Heather.
Sorry. Thank you, Amy, for that quick introduction. So, of course, we did want to spend just a moment in connection. A lot of our work is driven by relationships in the residency space. So we did want to just spend some time in community. And the prompt we have today is, what was something, hobby, music, games, anything, that you were really into as a kid, and are you still into it now? And you can just drop that into the chat. Give yourself a second to think about it. Something that you were super into as a kid, and are you still into that thing currently?
Yeah, those were great. Yeah, I loved reading those. Definitely connected with Star Wars, Transformers, the R&B and hip hop for sure. The 90s R&B lives on. That's great. So we are really looking forward to this part of the presentation where 3 districts will share their unique approaches to connecting the LCAP with residency sustainability. They're going to talk about their first steps, the data that informed their work, who they partnered with, and how their LCAP goals and actions are supporting their programs. Here is the format for this part of our meeting this morning. Each district will have about 10 minutes to share their approach. After that 10-minute presentation, we'll pause for a brief Q&A if you have any clarifying questions for the presenter. Then once all 3 programs have had a chance to present and share their great information with us, We will invite you to breakout rooms for a longer conversation about what stood out to you and how this all connects to your own context. And so before we get started, of course, I'll give you a quick snapshot of each of the three districts you'll be hearing from. First up is going to be Morongo Unified School District. They launched their residency program in 2022. They're a rural district with a target of about 10 residents per year, and they're in the early stages of using the LCAP. Right now, they're using some LCAP dollars to pay mentor stipends. After that, we'll hear from Palm Springs Unified School District. They started their program in 2023 with a goal of welcoming around 25 residents each year. And as a more urban district, they're exploring different possibilities for leveraging LCAP funds to support their program. And then finally, San Juan Unified School District will share with us. They started in 2022 and typically bring in 20 to 25 residents a year. In their suburban urban setting, they've already integrated a good, decent portion of the residency model into their LCAP, which has definitely helped them to build stability in their program. And so first up, we have Matt Roush. He is the resident program facilitator with Morongo Unified School District. It's always so great to connect with you, Matt. I'll hand it over to you, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Sounds great. Thanks, Javier. Hey, everybody. I made sure I was unmuted, so I didn't do the mute Zoom thing. When I was teaching distance wise, when we were all there, I had a mug that just says you're on mute, and so I could just start holding it up to students, so I didn't have to stop every time. Hi, everyone. You probably don't know where Morongo Unified School District is, unless you're one of our neighbor districts, which is Palm Springs Unified. So it's kind of fun to have our desert districts represented here. If you don't know where we are, if you are SoCal, you probably know Casino Morongo. That's actually not us. That's something a mistake a lot of people make. We're centered around Joshua Tree, California. So we are a high desert rural community. And we cover a lower amount of students numerically, but a large amount of communities geographically. For example, our district is geographically larger than the state of Rhode Island. But yet we serve about 8 to 9,000 students, right? I forget the number off the top of my head. It's in the mid 8,000s. So just to give you a glimpse of where we are early in the phase of implementing our LCAP, and over the next couple of years, we'll be seeing more and more of that coming in. So kind of my story in the three districts that we're showing you guys is kind of like a starting point that we'll see progressing as well. I have rebranded our program as something called Teach Morongo. I'm sure there's a lot of different levels of development and programs or exploration of programs in this Zoom meeting right now. So I kind of wanted to break some of that journey down for you. We started this, our first cohort in fall of 23, but our residency journey actually started in 2022. As this was popping up and kind of, being accessed by some higher ups in our district that wanted to see this thing start. We started working with a couple agencies, organizations that helped with the planning phase. One of them was WestEd, which I bet other programs have been exposed to as well. But that was kind of a planning year for us. The first piece of advice I want to give, not just for the LCAP, but also for the program design, is that if you're going to have a coordinator or a TOSA or some type of district personnel running the program, bring them in on the planning phase of said program. I think that was an immediate lesson that we learned early. For example, in the planning year, 22 to 23, which is before our program timeline on the screen, I was still a full-time teacher and I was not part of the program. I was brought in the summer before we launched in 23. And the reason I'm kind of giving that as a general heads up is that I had to kind of come in and figure out what this thing was as I stepped into it. But then we found some designs that we had to change pretty quickly once it was implemented. And that really slowed us down for a year. So piece of advice number one is bring that person in or the identified potential person in on the planning phase. But once we hit the ground rolling, we did pretty well. And we started with a small private university, which I see kind of in those early 2020s seemed to be some of the early IHEs that took on residencies. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but we started a small private university in our area called the University of Redlands. And one of the challenges for our program, which may be represented here or not, is that we are a rural district and we are geographically rural as well. So we started with an issue where a lot of our resident teachers were commuting into our basin, which created challenges of itself, right? And kind of like teachers commuting in, right? And in that pilot year, we quickly realized that we wanted to expand our IHEs as well. I'll be kind of touching on that. in just a minute. But for Teach Morongo, what we're envisioning is a wraparound support program that braids multiple pathways into becoming teachers in our district, with the teacher residency as the core of that, as the foundation of that. So what we're planning for in our LCAP, with the slight funds we have this year, with the increasing funds we'll be seeing over the next 2 years, is to be building towards a program where we are trying to fill as many as our new hires from our resident training pool essentially as possible, because what we are seeing are an incredible output of highly prepared teachers that are able to step successfully into their classroom and also want to perpetuate and grow that kind of momentum that we're talking about. And that's something I'm talking as a critical mass theory. I'm going to touch on that towards the end of my presentation here. So we'll loop back around. So that's kind of a quick history of where we've been. I've been running this program full time now for 2 years, and we are in our third cohort. Out of that initial pilot phase, only half of our that first pilot year, only half of our resident teachers finished their credential program. And this was, I'm just gonna be very honest with you guys now. We were a small cohort there. We only had 4 in our first year. But we did end up hiring the other 2 on, and we've been seeing success from that as well. And that's been kind of the launching point for a lot of momentum we've seen growing in our district as well. Starting in the 24 to 25 school year, I took on the position full time and revamped a lot of our approach to that, our phases, our program, more of the structural way that we run our residency program, which I won't be getting into today. But the immediate realization was, and especially with the work I started doing with SR TAC, was that the sooner we started to align and have a presence of this program in our LCAP and our LCAP goals, the sooner we would see it implemented and the more longevity and permanence it would have. As many of you know, LCAPs can be changed, obviously, rotationally, but when programs and goals are identified in there, you start to see the money that follows, right? When the program aligns with the goals, the money then is prioritized, towards perpetuity of that program. And we started with our mentor stipends, and that was kind of a toe in the water, essentially. We had some other grant funding that we braided with this and some other parts of funds, including my salary, which would be educator effective funds. I bet a lot of you guys have those grants that are sunsetting essentially this year for most. But that was kind of our first extra funds that were coming in. Then we started using some LCAP funds to help supplement the mentor stipends. And that, again, think of a scaffolded, gradual approach towards our increased presence in our district financial sustainability, right? We're not jumping in to full LCAP, full funding immediately. It's going to be a gradual step into that. Again, kind of like scaffolded learning. And with those mentor funds, we chose to pay our mentors at a fairly high level. We pay them $5,000 a year, for the work that is mostly done during their contractual work days. But what you see is the extra, effort and time and mental space that takes, especially through the early phases of a resident teacher, especially in the first semester. And what that also allowed me to do was create I don't want to say competitive, I don't think that's the right word, but a prestige to being a resident teacher. It wasn't us begging, we weren't going around school sites saying, we'll even take a student teacher, how it has traditionally been done for, forever in our culture. It allowed us to create a mentor bank of some of the best and the people who had the heart and energy to want to pour in to our goal of building educators that are ready to be successful from the start. So with that first toe in with the mentor stipends in our LCAP begins the rest of our progression. And essentially, the big picture vision is to incrementally take on, like I said before, more and more of the funding into our LCAP. But that's probably also going to begin starting in the next 2 years with taking on residents that are outside of our grant area that we aren't going to use grant money for. So for example, our resident program, our grant that we're funded by, which is both the implementation and the capacity grants, it targets all multiple. We have outside of credential goals like diversifying our workforce and other aspects of our goals that are incredibly important. But looking from a credential point of view, we're taking on all multiple subject, right, within some of those other qualifiers that meet all SPED. And then for secondary, we're only taking STEM subjects, essentially math and science, right, outside of SPED. So as we grow forward, we want to start adding other credential areas because we have a decent amount of grant money to pay for those credentials that are not covered by the grant. So, for example, if we want to take on an ELA resident, right, or a physical education or whatever outside of our grant areas, that's going to be where we start taking some of those funds first. But starting in 26 to 27 next school year, excuse me, that's where we're going to start seeing more of an increased official presence or LCAP, shooting for full financial sustainability in 2028, 29. So essentially, we are in a first of 3 steps that will be culminating 2 school years from now. And we've also entered into SRTAC with another community of practice that's helping us build that over the next 2 years, for which we're very grateful, very excited, and very enthusiastic to be a part of, especially as a small rural district. And if I can pitch that to anyone else in the room, if you are a smaller rural district, there are challenges that you face. And SRTAC actually has a rural residency network that I've been involved in since last spring, that we're building to help connect districts with those kind of unique challenges or actually opportunities, right? Different situations. It's not just a negative connotation. So with that timeline in mind, if we could skip to the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, thank you. You guys are probably asking like where to start on this. And there are very systemic, and looking at Palm Springs is going to show you some great stats and some great target goals that they came up in the beginning. But there are also some like strategic big pictures I want to show you as well for a philosophy of where to begin. Again, I'm sure we have a range of districts and LEAs and charter schools and sites that are at different parts of this journey. But ours really started with probably my personality embedded in it as the leader of the program, which is to start with our branding, which is to start with like our mission of spreading what we are doing, why we are doing it, and what we hope to be. And so my first advice would be, even though we're not talking about the financial side yet, you have to get the players, the pieces, and the institutions in line to see the kind of specific LCAP inclusion that we are all shooting for or already have attained to various levels. And so when I say focusing on your brand, your PR, it doesn't just start with the high ups. It also goes with the community and the school sites and the administrators of those school sites. But honestly, a lot of the teachers of the district as well. I used to make a joke in my first year and really kind of last year too. We're in our third year, as I told you before, our third cohort. But I would make a joke a lot in our first 2 cohorts when people are asking what I was doing now that I was outside of the classroom. My answer was that you don't know what we're doing yet, but in 3 years, everybody will, right? And that was kind of the goal. And I started site by site, really kind of almost like, to make a millennial example, if you'll excuse me, like in the Mighty Ducks 2, when Emilio Estevez is going around with his duck whistle and he's putting the team together, right? Getting the right people on board. I apologize. I'm sorry. But getting the right people on board, right? To not only support what we're doing, but to be a part of that. And I'll be honest with you, part of my first goals, yes, of course, we'll be talking about the board. Yes, of course, we'll be talking about the cabinet. But was getting the right teachers and movers excited and enthusiastic about what we are trying to do. All of your districts saw high levels of teacher turnover in COVID in the years following, right? We saw some of our peak in 2021 in the cost of our teacher turnover. And not only was that a financial cost for us, but it was also a personnel and learning cost for us. And when teachers saw this happening at their sites, when people were feeling the ripple effects of that, it was honestly easy to get people excited about an innovative step we are going to take to try to not only like turn that around, but also raise the bar, raise the floor of our teacher community. And our union got behind this really fast. So when you're going to be talking money, and again, I know I'm kind of talking outside the dollar signs right now, but this is, I think, a lot of what needs to happen behind the scenes. Getting our union as early supporters of what we were doing as a teacher movement, not just a top-down new acronym movement, right, was politically powerful for us to see success. And once we got sites, and especially lead sites in our district, excited about that and the right people to kind of spread that, I started having people reach out to us about like what this was and how to get involved. And from there, and really became about getting certain district-wide power players on board. And that's where we began to develop momentum with our cabinet, with our Board of Education, with specific site admin or site leaders, right? And of course, like I just mentioned, our union leadership. And you always have to start with the cabinet, right? Don't go straight to a board member. That will make certain superintendents or assistant superintendents very unhappy with you, right? If you try to go that route. So, and again, I taught government and politics for 15, 16 years. So this is where I come from, right? And when you're working with upper leadership, I think it's less of people not wanting to do new things, but finding out how that can work towards larger goals, both fiscally, managerially, is that a word, and instructionally, right? And in saying that, starting with our program is housed under human resources, under personnel, right? And that's where my current position is. And I'm watching my time, guys. Don't worry, I'll move to this next part pretty quick here. But when we get into the PR side of the politics I'm talking about, getting those key cabinet personnel outside of just my department fired up for what we're doing was critical, which led towards Board of Education success, which led towards the rest of that fall shed, right? And you have to really put together your A team. And that's my third bullet point on here, right? And what I mean by your A team is a multi-pronged, multi-partner team that can help run this. It cannot, as we just shared at the beginning, talking about these program folders, there are people that change positions, right? And things and having something be about one person will kill a program fast no matter the momentum. So for me, it was putting together partners from our IHEs, from our business services department, from HR, of course. And so for my dream team is my HR assistant superintendent, Stacy Small, and she's been incredible. Our director of fiscal services, Faith Segovia, and our two IHE leads from University of Redlands, and our second IHE that we added, which is Cal State San Bernardino. We're one of their first districts that they partner with, and we've seen a lot of success with both universities. And by putting them together and also getting them involved in SR TAC, and especially the community of practices we've done, we've seen a lot of momentum with that, and people outside of myself that can also bring other skills to the team. I have my skill set. These individuals see it from their perspective, and we grow towards these LCAP and program sustainability goals together. And I would highly recommend too, as you're in early, depending on where you are in this phase, to take program visits. SR TAC does a great job. I think it's a lot of times in February or so, opening up other programs that you can go visit, whether it be a site or a district or a charter school network. I went to the one in San Fernando. I think it was Puck, right? Or it was last February. And, learned some great things. I also got connected at the symposiums in the spring that I've been to many other opportunities, which I would highly recommend if you haven't been. For example, we got plugged in with Mike Havens at Bakersfield City, which is about 3.5 hours north of us. And I took a whole team out there to visit, and they've been instrumental in helping us walk through the details of their LCAP and their inclusion as well. So I'm kind of giving you guys these early starter points as an example of a district that's kind of easing into this and taking its first steps of maybe 3 to help you see the story of the journey we've been taking on, to see some pretty fast moving success that we've been seeing, and a district and a board that is committed to having this on our as self-sustained by 2028. Right. That is essentially what got us there. Those were the steps. Those were the stories that helped make this happen. And then finally, to build your case in this. And this isn't a last thought here. All right. This is obviously what needs to be going all along. But you can't just argue like I am based on qualitative, experiences. You have to have the quantitative side as well. And I think looking at how, comparative studies or comparative districts and your own data, showing the story of how much you're spending on teacher turnover, how much you're losing from lower qualified teachers like interns, STIPs, and PIPs, right, in learning situations. When you start looking at the attendance issues that follow a lot of those environments, you're able to show a prism of an idea, not just one perspective, but many points of view that show what our issue is and how this program can at a root and core level start to change a lot of these areas. Because I really do believe that great teaching is caught, not just taught in the pedagogical classroom. And when you're able to show that through not only qualitative, but quantitative data, that's going to move your program forward even more. And we've been able to align our program with LCAP goal number 2, which I believe I saw y'all put the slide later in the slide deck. I'm not sure if it was for an example or not, but you guys might be touching at it again. But for ours, LCAP goal number 2, essentially without reading it to you and quoting the whole dang thing, is about teacher support, school climate, and staff development, right? And obviously, teacher residency follows under a lot of this. But there were metric connections within goal number 2 that we were able to really target and identify, and will continue to grow as we not only start to implement, but continue to implement further financial sustainability and LCAP dollars. The big one, obviously, is a recruitment and retention focus of our teachers, and especially looking at what was happening in the early 2020s, which is starting to sound historical at this point, but it's only a few long years ago. We're able to really kind of tie them into that staff goal, as well as our school climate and engagement goals, and showing how teachers who have come out of our residency program compared to other first-year hires that were essentially new teachers, not just transfer teachers, right? But showing how they're performing in their school, not just only on their test scores, but also on behavior issues, right? Looking at things like attendance of students and that teacher themselves. These are arguments you're able to make that help drive a lot of different power players and decision makers in your district towards supporting this goal. Capacity building actions was huge for us, as well as diversification of the workforce, which is fundamentally wrapped up into our goals under our tri-grants that we received. And with that scaffolding approach that we talked about, we are going to be taking on more and more of that, starting with, as Javier already mentioned, our mentor stipends. And if you guys, I'll take questions just a moment. If we can just jump to my last slide here, please. What I'm really kind of the big picture and how I've really argued this movement is what I call critical mass theory when it comes to teaching staffs and academic climates of campuses. And while fiscal instructional plans are key, like that's obviously what we're going to be using for our meat of our argument, right? The data that we use to say this is why we should prioritize our district dollars. The emphasis needs to be on transformational change. And I don't like always starting with problem leading to solution models, but our district had problems with fully staffing our teacher staffs with highly qualified teachers, right? With retaining those teachers and with implementing high quality instructions where any student can succeed and has an equitable chance at that, right? And in bringing on this idea, I'm going to like kind of, just share my personal opinion on this, but administrators are incredibly important at sites. I am not taking away from that. And there's a room full of people who have done a great job, or a Zoom room full of people who have done a great job with that. But just as important that is, I think in making transformational change, especially from the mass of teachers that you have out there, you have to get people believing that if we invest in high quality new teachers, that they can bring something and step into something that starts to shift a teaching culture at a site. And when you start compounding those over years of the highest trained, highest prepared, most supported teachers in the history of our state, then that can lead towards the transformational state change, not just from the top down, but from the inside out that can occur on a teaching staff. And that's become part of our vision and part of our goals and what we've now come to call Teach Morongo. So I know I just kind of word dumped on y'all. And again, kind of looking at a story of 3 districts, and you're seeing one in the early phase of LCAP implementation. I hope I helped some of you guys who are fairly green or wondering or kind of designing your strategy to kind of have some strategic approach goals here, not just on the argument data side, but also on the qualitative side as well. And I'd be happy to take some questions, unless I was so eloquent that there are none at this point. And know that you're going to see some other districts here further along in the process in our next 2 examples. So I will pause and wait in the awkward state that is asking for questions on Zoom. How are we doing, y'all? Got any thoughts? Got any burning insights or questions?
Thank you, Matt, for your testimony. I think you bring up some really great points. One of the things I wanted to underscore was just the connection you made between your initial efforts in getting and creating that A team and kind of offering the residency program as a way to address some of the other issues that your specific district and kind of your community were having. I think that's super critical. And I just really appreciated like kind of the last slide that you offered around it's not just like instructional impact or fiscal impact, it's also like the philosophy behind it. And I think that's really important because you're not only selling, or offering this idea of like, okay, the residency program is going to solve these problems. But the great thing about residency is that we found that it does impact in ways that we didn't necessarily anticipate, right? Like it can change the culture of a school, it can change the culture of a district. And so really showcasing that I think is really important. And the examples that we have across the state where that's happening, I think is really important. So I just want to say thank you for highlighting that and bringing that up and just sharing your experience. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. I think the story of the program is part of the power, y'all. And yes, all the data that we show is necessary. That's also what everybody sees for everything. So I think bringing that qualitative story side to it really, moves people, not just programs. You saw a question in the chat here pop up too. It says, Matt, how are you gathering evidence of classroom impact through the teacher directly or through HR or something else? Okay, so yeah, great question. First of all, the word of mouth thing is fantastic amongst those teaching staff. So when they start seeing that, who doesn't want a co-teacher in the classroom with them, right, for the year? It's great. But we can look at a lot of those things qualitatively as well. So what I did is I worked with one of our data specialists in our district, to look at the sites and across the district as well of 2 things. One, classrooms with a resident mentor and a resident in them, right? The co-teaching model in action. And then 2, classrooms with teachers who were residents in them compared to the rest of their cohorts, right? And when you look at everything from MTSS or, suspension or referral data and all that for the behavior side, you could also do the same with benchmarks our districts do, the different reading programs like iReady and different instructional programs we use, but also testing scores. Right, we're huge in that. And actually, I have another meeting on Friday. I'm doing this with that same data person, essentially quarterly, to help kind of track and show some of that progress, to show not only the philosophy of what we want to do, but to the extent that we have it so far, the efficacy of what we do, as well as the state data that it tends to line up with. Because so far, our data is lining with a lot of larger districts that have been doing a long time, and the state residency data showing the efficacy of such. I think I answered your question. If not, throw another follow up in there. Do you have any union pushback on who was chosen for mentors since they were getting higher stipends? Okay. So no, I haven't had any union pushback on that. However, I also am realigning all of our mentor stipends next year to do some balancing, and that made people happy as well. There was an interview process for these mentors, so it wasn't like I just went out and said you, not you. We definitely opened them up to our sites that we have as residency sites. I did, to be honest with you, though, of course, like talk to the heavy hitters, right? The people that would be ideal ahead of time, encourage them to do so. But there were open interviews, and essentially what I've done too is created a mentor bank. And also, I'll wrap up with this: we've created a mentor bank that's ready to go all the time. So right now, I only have a third of that mentor bank actually mentoring. The other 2/3 are waiting for a spring start or next year with people who are kind of ready to go on a rotational model. So it spreads the love a little bit. And that's my last answer. And I don't want to take other people's time. Thank you for having us, and go get it. Create that critical mass of change.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. Always appreciate your enthusiasm. Great ideas and thoughts. And also, I did not see the Mighty Ducks reference coming, but that was well done.
Quack, quack, my friend.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. So we're going to keep the learning going. Just lots of great ideas for us. And so next up, we have Palm Springs Unified School District. And we are about to hear from Alexis Acker, their director of the residency program, and Dr. Jim Pfeffer, their director of state and federal programs. So thank you both for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm excited to share an overview about our Palm Springs Unified Teacher Residency Program, how it started, what's driving it, and how we're able to grow it over the past few years. So if you wouldn't mind moving the slide forward. There we go. Thank you. Our program was really inspired for the need to develop and retain highly qualified teachers, to diversify our workforce, and to ensure that we're growing our own, so truly homegrown educators who understand and reflect our community. And we've been able to achieve that through a combination of strong partnerships and strategic grant funding. And so in April of 2022, we received our first capacity grant, and that was $250,000. And following that, later that year, we received our implementation grant from the CTC, and that was $625,000 per year for 4 years. And so we've also secured our TQP grant, which was the Teacher Quality Partnership, in October of 2022, and that provided $12,500 per resident for the 4 years. Although federal TQP grants ended earlier this year, we've been able to sustain the program through Title II funds, as well as with our partnership with Alder GSC. They offered us a grant, a one-time 1-year grant, to help offset those costs. So we're very fortunate to be in partnership with them. So if you'd like to move the slides forward, thank you. And then we just wanted to share a little bit about our story. I definitely agree with Matt that having that planning year was very impactful. I was able to be onboarded by Alder and spent the whole year training and visiting other Alder GSC school districts in Southern California, and they really took me under their wing and helped me develop and understand how to run this residency. And so, yeah, just to show a couple of quick highlights. So that was in 2023, where the focus was on building our capacity and recruiting. In 23-24, we officially launched. We had a cohort of 19 residents. and they all graduated. 16 of them were hired in our school district. And then the other 3 were hired in Desert Sands, which is now an Alder partnership as well. And then just wanted to point out in 2025-26, we had 25 residents. And so our second year, we had 25 graduate, and we had 21 hired by our district, and 4 of which were hired by Desert Sands. And so 2026-7, we are projecting to, continue the program, secure some funding, and we are currently in our 3rd cohort. And then if you could advance the slides again, we wanted to highlight that our program comes from our community. And so we wanted to take a look at our impact so far. So we've had over at this point, because now we're doing interviews for our 4th cohort, we've had over 200 applicants for these 4 cohorts. 66% of those applicants come from underrepresented backgrounds, which directly supports our goal of diversifying the workforce. And then across the first 3 cohorts, we've had 69 total teacher residents. So we, as I said, hired 16 of them in 2024, 21 of them in 2025, and we are projecting to graduate and hire another 25. Another great thing we wanted to point out is 71% are current Palm Springs Unified employees. So moving into the program, 71% of them were already in our workforce. 66% of them are alumni, and 66 were also raised here in the Coachella Valley, and 23% are actual parents in our district. So now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Pfeffer to share some information about our LCAP funding.
Thank you, Alexis. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Jim Pfeffer, Director of State and Federal Programs here for the district. I also happen to be the lead LCAP writer, so I could go for days talking about the LCAP piece, but I won't bore you with all of that right now. I want to hit a couple of key highlights as it relates to integrating the teacher residency piece within the LCAP. We've had this program listed in our LCAP now for a couple of years as part of ongoing conversations. And really our goal here in our next couple of minutes is to give you an idea of our path that we followed to put it there and how it kind of exists and breathes in that space. One of our biggest pieces is that educational partner input element. This is not only a requirement of the LCAP, but it's something we take great pride in here. Give you some numbers from last year. We had 23 different meetings last year specific around LCAP input of some variety across the district. That's a pretty consistent number for us. And that includes our district advisory teams, our in-house staff groups, but also extensive work done with a number of parent groups, students, and that doesn't even include the thousands of survey submissions that we get. I think some of the key pieces to keep in mind is you're not likely to hear in these input meetings, we want a teacher residency program. Parents aren't coming in and advocating necessarily to have this piece, but what you do hear are things like, we want really highly qualified teachers teaching our kids. We want people that can create welcoming environments, people that understand our community and our families, people that are connected in some way. And when you start putting the dots together between those pieces, teacher residency type programs bubble to the top very quickly. They're your people for the most part. They're in your community. They're building those pieces together. And so as we're thinking about how those entry routes into an LCAP come into place, how you're looking at your input and how you're then saying, okay, based on your input, we've put this in, here's what it is. Then you get positive feedback, hopefully, back from the group of, yes, this is in response to what we want. So far in our context, that's worked very well. We've heard good things regarding that program because we'll have parents that say, oh, my child was in that particular class. And yes, this person was great. And I'm glad to hear that Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so is now working at X school. So it's wonderful that we have that positive piece, but that's one way to be thinking about that incorporation is how does it fit into some of that partner input you're already collecting? Similarly, if I can go to the next slide, our context as it relates to writing the LCAP becomes a key component. So when we write our actions, we write them as services packages, not specific to one single expenditure item. So in our case, our teacher residency program is embedded into our recruiting and retaining highly qualified staff action item. I'll go into that language momentarily. But the big key is that in our context, we're not listing it as its own separate thing, but as part of the methodology that Palm Springs Unified is using to make sure that we have the best folks in front of students on a day-to-day basis and that we're keeping those folks here. Again, if we think about the successes that teacher residency programs have, those fit well into that context. So when we're looking at ways that we can make sure our CalSAS data, our teacher reporting data is of the highest quality, that we have proper credentials, that our misassignments are very low number, if any at all. We want to also make sure that that teacher residency program graduation rate is very high because those are the folks that tend to stick around. And so on the next slide, as we'll move forward, I've given you our current language in relation to this particular action. You can see it talks about a number of things, including our reflective coaches, which is our in-house induction program, as well as some additional support pieces that we put in. But I've highlighted at the bottom there the part of the action description as it is currently written in the LCAP that mentions that due to grants and federal funds, we operate this program as part of this overall methodology. So we have those candidates that come into these placements and fill these high need positions, but come from our current classified ranks or come from our local community, and therefore have that built-in connection point. I think that Matt did a great job in his presentation building that linkage. Hopefully, you're hearing the same thing on our end of really that internal investment becoming a huge component. So as part of that, then, of course, you have to attach funding. Our next slide goes ahead and shows some of that path because it's been an interesting journey. Alexis pointed out a little bit, we actually had the program almost cost neutral for the district due to our grants at the beginning, which was fantastic. So we were able to fully fund, we were able to move forward. Unfortunately, Washington had different ideas for us. The TQP grant went away, and so we had to scramble a little bit. After speaking with a few offices up at CDE, we were able to move some things into Title II temporarily, and you can see that in our yellow 24, 25, 25, 26 funding models section. We have some contributions that are helping now, but as we move forward, we're in the same conversations everybody else is. What happens with sustainability? How do we move these pieces in? And so some of those dollars that we initially set aside as placeholder while we were getting our grant situation figured out are now coming back into the conversation now in 26, 27 of saying, okay, what portions of this does our LCAP need to pick up? How do we continue to integrate different grants? What new grant possibilities are coming that we can use to keep this thing sustainable moving forward? And so conversations that we're having have listed kind of along the bottom there. What does our cohort size need to look like? Do we have to adjust stipend amounts? What are those ancillary program costs? All of that is factoring into this LCAP conversation. But because we have it built into our plan, it's embedded in such a way where it's part of our philosophy of recruiting and retaining teachers. The conversation isn't so much can we do it, it's how do we do it and how do we do it well. And so we continue to make sure we're monitoring those outcomes, making sure that we develop those things, and on the back end, try to figure out those funding connections. So you can see we're, having a number of conversations that are similar. I think the next slide is the question slide, if I remember correctly. We just wanted to share with you some of those highlights and some of those key pieces that we're integrated in. And at this point, we'll pause and see if there's any questions for either Alexis or myself. Well, our contact information is there if you'd like to reach out. We'll be floating around for the rest of the time. I want to thank SR Tech for inviting us into this conversation as well. So at this point, I'll hand it back over to Javier.
Yeah, thank you both so much, Alexis and Jim. Some really good insight. I will point out something that stood out to me. I really appreciated how you said educational partners may not say, "Hey, we need a residency program," but a lot of things that they do want, like highly qualified teachers, the program will fulfill those needs. So I like how you made that distinction there. I think that's very helpful as we advocate for our programs. And so, yeah, thank you again for sharing that approach and sharing your ideas. We are to that moment where we will take a quick break. So we'll give you some time. So feel free to turn off your cameras, stretch for a few minutes. We're going to take 5. So let's please come back. Let's do it right at 11 o'clock. Yep. So welcome back all. I hope you're able to take a quick break from the screen, maybe grab a drink or grab a snack. We're going to get back into the great learning, hearing directly from programs. Of course, we heard from two prior to the break. And so now we will hear from San Juan Unified School District with Nicole Kukral, their Director of Professional Learning and Curriculum Innovation, and Calais Eskridge, the Residency Facilitator. So thank you both for joining us. We're happy to hear about your programming experience.
Thank you so much, Javier. I'm really excited to be here today with everybody. I also want to acknowledge Julie Fabricini, who's in this space. She works for Alder, and we work closely with her. And I just can't underscore enough how much we appreciate the partnership with Alder Graduate School of Education as well. So anyway, I'm excited to share some of the work with you all today. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. Before I dive into our funding journey, I just wanted to give a little bit of a snapshot of our residency program. Our residency was formed in 2021. That's when the partnership agreement was reached with San Juan Unified and Alder Graduate School of Education, with the goal to do two things. Number one, diversify our workforce, and number two, to staff hard to fill credential areas. So those for us included multiple subject with an emphasis on transitional kindergarten, special education, mild moderate specifically, and then single subject STEM, so math and science. And then finally, we did have single subject world language, which we're not currently offering, but we have had 2 residents graduate with their world language credential, specifically in Spanish. You can see a little bit about our school district here. We exist geographically over about 75 square miles in Sacramento County, which is in Northern California, and we have approximately 65 schools when we consider all of our comprehensive schools and also our alternative learning centers. We have approximately 40,000 students. On any given day, it's either right under 40,000 or right above 40,000. So we're really hovering in that range. And you can see here that we definitely have a very diverse student body, and our multilingual students have grown significantly in the last several years. Our residency data, 25-26 is our 4th year of residence. We have to date had 57 graduates from the program, and we currently have 24 residents enrolled. And out of the 57 graduates, we've been able to hire 54 of them and retain 90% of them. So it's really exciting. Our data is very encouraging in terms of just the success and, of course, meeting the goals that I shared that we have for our residency program. You can also see the racial demographics, which really closely mirror our student demographics, with a couple of areas where we need to do some work, but it's very exciting. So yes, thank you for moving to the next slide. We are in a very unique position in that our residency has been funded through the LCAP for a couple of years now. And so I really wanted to share the journey that we've been on to get to where we are now, which is a place where sustainability feels, we're not sure how it's going to happen, but it feels like it could happen. Like it feels somewhat realistic to us. So that's a good place to be. So as I mentioned earlier, our residency was established in 2021 with the partnership and some initial cabinet approval of funds. So you can see in May of 2021, our cabinet approved approximately $160,000 for the 22-23 school year for our first cohort of residents, and then $322,000 for the 23-24 school year for our second cohort of residents. When the partnership was established, and it's important for me to note, like I wasn't part of those initial conversations, so I came on to the residency like in kind of mid 21-22. So there are pieces of the story that I personally sometimes am missing, but I've been able to piece together quite a bit of it over the last few years. So we did, when the partnership was conceived of, we knew that that grant was coming. And we definitely had planned on applying for the grant and developed our budget kind of with those grant funds in mind, potentially. And so in 21-22, which was technically our planning year, we had that intent to apply for the teacher residency implementation grant. And at the time, we thought that it was going to be the RFA would be released in April of 2022. That didn't quite happen. The RFA ended up being released in August of that year with the deadline of October. So we were in this really tricky position where we kind of like launched the residency without having security with our funding for the long term, which then created a situation in 22-23. In the first cohort, we had 14 residents. Our residency was operating with the funding that San Juan Unified had approved. But we weren't sure like how the funding was going to work in the long term. So we had to go to cabinet, especially once the grant was approved, to ask for additional funding to help us support the grant or help us support the program like through the life of the grant. So cabinet approved a budget through 25-26. So there was like this weird tentative timeline where we were like, can we afford to keep this going even right now or not? And, you know, we worked through it. We're very grateful for our cabinet support. And so in late 2020 or kind of like mid 2022, 2023, while we were kind of like after we had gotten that grant funding guaranteed, I had to go to cabinet and request additional funds. So in order to do that, I needed to give them like the whole history of what had been approved, why it had been approved, what the goals of the residency were. And then cabinet ultimately did approve additional funding for 23-24 and 24-25. And then they determined to put it into the LCAP so that we would have an ongoing source of funding, leveraging our supplemental dollars. We already had an LCAP item related to workforce diversity. And while this was not the same item, it was a separate LCAP item, there was definitely precedent set in the LCAP to support this work. And I'll talk a little bit more about our LCAP item in just a minute. So we can go on to the next slide. So like I mentioned, the funding was approved, but with an expectation that we would collect and track a variety of metrics, which you can see here. These are not going to be foreign to anybody in this room who has the CTC implementation grant, because many of these metrics are aligned to that grant report. And so we definitely collect and report on these metrics each year. We also report on them not only in the grant report, but also to our superintendent and members of cabinet, and then also to our board. For the last 2 years, we have done a residency update in August and shared with them a lot of this data so that they have an update on how successful the residency is being. So for 24-25 and 25-26, we currently have an LCAP item in place. It's to support just sort of additional expenses to run our residency. And at this point, I don't see that LCAP item sunsetting. We definitely had some conversations this year about some cost savings in the LCAP for a variety of items so that we can continue some one-time funded actions. And the residency was not on the list for reductions. So I anticipate that that funding will continue for the next few years at least. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So using our LCAP, this is really what it looks like right now. For our LCAP funding, our district allocated an expenditure of $235,000 approximately. What that pays for is partial funding for our residency facilitator salary and benefits. And then also just incidental costs not approved in the grant budget. One of the things that kind of was not on anyone's radar, I don't think, when this residency was formed and budgeted for, was like, how do we actually pay for costs to administer the program? Like, you know, Colleen needed supplies. Colleen needed a printer. I mean, there's a lot of supplies that also go into just helping the residency function as a program. And so we use some of that LCAP funding to help pay for some of those administrative costs as well. Our goal for the LCAP is goal 3, which is for us, school conditions, climate, and family engagement. The state metric that we use is the credentialed staffing state metric. And then we do have local LCAP metrics that we use to internally engage in a process of continuous improvement. So you can see here that those metrics are the number of residents who earn a credential in our program, the number of residents that are hired into San Juan Unified, and then the demographics of residents kind of as they align and correspond to our student population so that we are meeting the goals of the program, or at least tracking to what extent we're meeting the goals of our program, which again is to diversify our workforce and then also hire the hard to staff positions. We can go ahead and go to the next item. So we're still working on this question of sustainability. Like I said, it feels realistic at this point, but there's also a lot of work to be done. And for us, the conversations have started to emerge in terms of like maybe different possibilities that we have for sustaining the residency long term and kind of working within some constraints of our budget. I think no matter how many ways we slice it, we are going to have to make an additional ask of funds for sustainability, but trying to mitigate the amount we have to ask for on an ongoing basis is my goal. So some possibilities that we've kind of like thought through is potentially reducing the cost of living disbursement. Currently, it's $30,000. In our year one, it was 15. So if it's possible to go back to that, and then potentially reducing the number of residents that we have in the program. Like I mentioned, that first year when we were operating with no grant funding, we were able to do it with a $15,000 cost of living disbursement and 14 residents. So really thinking about how can that combination get us back, to where we were and closer to a model where we are not dependent on grant funding. And then one of the really helpful aspects of our program is that we do provide health benefits for any residents who were previously employees in San Juan. So they do retain the employee only benefits. And, that cost kind of ranges depend on what benefits people select and what their coverage looks like. So potentially looking at that as a possibility, but that was the one area that our residents were like, this is a deal breaker for me. If I don't have benefits, I can't continue in the program. So it's probably even more important to look at benefits and retaining that current model than it is the cost of living disbursement. There's still a lot of work that we need to do. I agree with Matt when he said earlier that you need to engage your union leadership early and often. I think transparently that was kind of a missing piece for us in the early years of the residency as those planning conversations were occurring. And so we just need to continue to bring our union leadership in so that they're invested in the program to the extent that we are, and that they really see this as a program that does need to sustain. So I think we just need to continue to deepen those conversations. I think we need to work out some detailed budget development scenarios using a variety of options for sustainability and thinking about like there was a time when this existed without grant funding. So how do we sort of replicate that? What might have to be adjusted? What can stay the same? And then I think just in the messaging piece, which is something that I want to get more clear on, is the analysis of like the hidden costs of employee turnover versus the return on investment of the residency. The residency is expensive to run. We all know this. But it's also really expensive to continually handle employee turnover. So that's something that I think we need to get sharper on. And I'm very excited about continuing those conversations and then just continuing to use our data to tell a compelling story. Our data is extremely compelling. Our program has been really successful, and just making sure that that data is front and center to help all of our interest holders understand the value that this program brings for our students and families in San Juan and our entire community. So that being said, I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and Kaleigh's here as well, so she may have some insight to add as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole and Kaleigh, for that insight. Just really quick, I thought it was so interesting how your program is incorporated into LCAP goal number 3 around with some efforts around school climate and diversifying the workforce. Typically, we're thinking about goal number 1, which is typically around providing highly qualified teaching staff. So that was really, really cool to think about how it might incorporate into a different LCAP goal. So thanks again.
Yeah, I did see a question in the chat that I wanted to address really quickly, if that's okay.
Of course.
So Sarah said she was wondering about labor laws in California. Can districts give benefits to people who are not full-time employees? So our district residents are on an educational leave, so they are able to retain their benefits. And it was an agreement that our HR department, who was initially in charge of this grant and this partnership, had reached with CSEA, one of our labor organizations. So we are able to extend those benefits to them.
Excellent. Some creative thinking there.
Mhm.
Thanks again. And I think I'll turn it over to Amy.
All right. So, just a huge thank you again to all three of our Spotlight programs for sharing how they're weaving their residency work into their LCAP priorities. Each story kind of highlighted a different way that programs are thinking about this work and how to put sustainability into action. On our resource document that we dropped at the beginning of the session, there's actually a link. It says program profiles, and that gives you more information about each of the programs that we featured today. But as Javier had mentioned, we do want to give you some space to kind of process the learning that you just heard and make some connections to your own context. Kind of reflect on what resonated, what sparked new ideas, and how you might be willing to, or how your program might be able to adopt some of these strategies within your own district. And so in your breakout rooms, we're going to give you a few minutes to talk about the two questions that you see on the screen. What stood out to you from the residency programs that shared today? And maybe what surprised or inspired you about how other districts are approaching sustainability with their programs? So we're going to give you about 7 minutes in the breakouts, and you can feel free to jot down any key takeaways or ideas that you might want to bring back to the larger group when we return. So we'll reconvene after to share some reflection and insights. I'm going to go ahead and open those breakouts now. You should get a notification to join. Okay, I think we have everybody back now. And so we wanted to take just a few minutes to kind of reconvene and share some of the great conversations that you had in your breakout room. So we just want to hear from the group, maybe what stood out to you in your discussions, anything that resonated, surprised, or inspired you based on what you heard from the Spotlight programs. Feel free to come off mute, or if you drop it in the chat, I'm sure one of my colleagues can read it aloud. Any takeaways?
In our group, oh,
Go.
I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to say in our group, we talked about thinking about how to make this more sustainable and who do we need to partner with from at least all of us were either from a district or a county office within our organizations around LCAP funding and goals. We all talked about, sometimes that can be challenging when you don't have additional funding streams from concentration dollars or those kinds of additional state funding. So it was very interesting to be able to hear around those kinds of things.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Emily. Yeah, in terms of who to engage with within your district to kind of get those conversations going. Heather, I know you were starting to come off mute. Go ahead.
No, just one of the things that we talked about was just the relationship between the three testimonials and how they kind of all underscored the same thing. Like they kind of said the same thing in different ways, and were very specific to their context and how it's clear, how important relationships are and the messaging and marketing and being clear about who the advocates can be for this work. Just kind of reflecting on the testimonies and what we heard today.
Other takeaways. Highlight some of those discussions from your breakouts. Your brave volunteers. And you can also feel free to drop in the chat.
I was going to just share real quick that I was fortunate enough to be in a room with Nicole and Brooke And so that was really neat because initially our conversation was around the union and getting the union involved from early on as one of the key kind of stakeholders and helping push everything through in the right direction. And then we started to talk about like the importance of the site administrators and how they have such a huge role and impact with our mentors, with our residents, how they're on our interview panels, and how they really, directly benefit, but also impact the residency.
Thank you, Alexis, for bringing that up. Yes, absolutely. Tapping into those site administrators and the power that their voice can yield in, helping to have some of those conversations with others throughout the district. All right. Well, I want to turn it over to Javier to introduce another special guest that we have here with us today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. And so, yes, we are thrilled to introduce our next guest speaker. Dr. Deborah Hernandez is the Director of Continuous Improvement and LCAP at the San Diego County Office of Education. Dr. Hernandez is part of the same department as Dr. Lisa Herzog, who we heard from in our first session, so that's a great connection. In her role, Deborah works closely with 43 school districts across San Diego, providing professional learning, workshops, and targeted district support. She leads the development and approval of local control and accountability plans, LCAPs. With more than 27 years of experience as a teacher, site administrator, district leader, and county director currently, Deborah brings both system level insight and that classroom perspective. She earned her master's and doctorate degrees in educational leadership from San Diego State University, where she studied how LCAP funding impacts English learner achievement statewide. Folks, we have the LCAP rock star on the line with us this morning today. And so welcome, Deborah, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for the rock star status. I love that. Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm Deborah Hernandez, and I've been with the county for 7 years. I've also, like Javier shared, I've also worked on sites as well as a site administrator, worked at the district office, and so LCAP has really been a part of my life for at least the last 10 years or so. So today, I'm going to take a little bit of a more technical approach to share with you, like, what do we look for in terms of approvability of an LCAP? All righty, so I'm gonna give you just a little bit of highlight of information. If you go to the next slide, that'd be great. So we're gonna look at the local control funding formula, or LCFF. From now on, I'll be saying LCFF priorities. I'm going to talk about this notion of increased or improved services. It is really a way to look at if an action is truly focused and targeted on the unduplicated pupils, which are your low income, foster youth, and English learners. And then how does your work connect to that, right? You'll have an opportunity to think about that. I have a tool that you can utilize. And then finally, the timeline for adoption. Thanks, Amy. So I want to bring your attention to this is called the Whole Child Map. And this is from the California Department of Education. Don't go into the link, Amy, but there is a link straight to their website that you can go to, because this is really the impetus of LCFF priorities. So I heard, the last presenter share a little bit about which priorities they're focusing in on, but we're going to talk about the priorities. There's a total of 10, but we're going to talk about the 8 because 2 are for county offices only, and they fit into this map. So the light blue area is conditions of learning, the green is engagement, and one of my favorite colors, like the marigold color, is student outcomes. So there's really 3 ways to organize it. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is as I want you to start thinking about how does your work align with these priorities, right? Because that's where you're going to do some of this background work that's going to assist you in thinking about, like, how can we get to the point of these great spotlights today, right? That just didn't happen. There was some work that happened prior to that. So if we go to the next slide, we'll start talking about the first one. So the first is conditions of learning. So this is the basic services. Amy, don't go into the link yet, but this is the basic services. One is, I heard it was touched upon just a few minutes ago, the recruiting and retaining qualified and effective teachers is one of those priorities. And when I say priority, that means you have to have a metric alongside it, right? You have to have a way to measure it. Instructional materials and facilities fall under basic services. Then we have implementation of state standards, access to Common Core state standards and ELD, as well. That's all in conditions of learning. But I wanted to bring your attention to the website. So if you tap on that, Amy, and bring it on over, that'd be great. Because the California Department of Education has outlined model practices. So if you look at the website, they'll bring you to this page, and you see there on that second bullet, it says partner with local institutions of higher learning to create teacher residency programs. So California Department of Education has already highlighted this is a model practice, right? So right from the get-go, that this is a model practice on way to meet priority one. All right, so you can take that back off. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I wanted to bring that to attention because that is an area that you can lean into, right? Because this is the model practice that California Department of Education has highlighted. If you go to the next one, thank you. Now, the next part is all about engagement, and you don't have to tap into the parent involvement, but I did link it to that page as well. Parent involvement is a priority. Not only is it a priority, but it is mandatory to engage educational partners in the process of developing the LCAP. Alrighty, so there's not only a metric you have to have, actions you have to have in your LCAP, but you have to identify all the educational partners that you're working with. And yes, what I heard is true. We get unions involved early on. They actually are a mandatory part of the educational partner engagement that we have in order to develop your LCAP. So yes, they should be in there. So my thinking for you all is you should be in those meetings as well, right? You need to know, like, when are they engaging educational partners for development of the next year's LCAP, and how can I be a part of that conversation? In addition, in the engagement, there is student engagement that has to do with attendance, graduation rates. So you have to have actions and measurements for that. And then school climate as well, suspension, expulsions. And then there's a survey for pupils, parents, and teachers on the sense of safety and school connectedness. All of these have our priority within the LCAP. All of them have actions and metrics on ways to measure that impact. And then the next one is the third part, which is student outcomes. This is the one that we probably usually think about most, especially right now. If you're keeping an ear to the ground with the dashboard release, right? So the California dashboard, a lot of conversation is around student achievement. You know, that is not only CAS, English, language arts, and math, but it also is EL proficiency, reclassification rate, advanced placement, college career readiness. So that's all bundled in this outcome, as well as other pupil outcomes, because then we want the districts and charter schools to really think about how are students doing in another content area like science, FAPA, physical education, so on and so forth. So each of these three bundles is a way to get information into the LCAP because you have to have measurements. So I wanted to highlight a couple of areas. You know what, I'm wondering, Amy, I think something, hold on, let me just look real fast. Yes, I added something in. Can you refresh? Is that a possibility?
I can stop share and reshare. I'm on a downloaded doc.
Oh, okay.
But they
Okay.
have the most updated one.
Okay, perfect. So when you look at the most updated one, I lifted language from your 3 spotlights today. Right. So I wanted to share that the Palm Springs, they talked about having actions that specifically align to LCAP and not thinking about it as an individual program, but think of it as a service package, which really is like, how are we going to provide what our students need, right? Also, they talked about aligning it to that priority one that I highlighted for you. In terms of, they also gave you some great action language, right? They highlighted action language too. In terms of the San Juan, they, what I loved and I heard them say is they not only in their LCAP have the state required standards, you know, identified and metrics, but they also coupled that with local measures. So their local measures were number of residents earning credentials, also talked about hired into San Juan Unified. So they coupled the two types of metrics. And then finally, the Morongo, they did a great job at thinking about the metric connection as well. So those are all great, promising practices. And I'm really glad that they were able to highlight that for you. Thank you, Amy. We go to the next slide. All right. I want to talk about this notion of increase or improve services. You may have heard it before, but it is really a criteria that we utilize in order to approve LCAPs. All right. So we approve 42 of our 43 LCAPs because the 43rd is our own LCAP for the county. This notion of increase or improve services is really a criteria in order to utilize the funds that are set aside for increasing the services, improving services for low income, English learner, and foster youth. So the LEA, either charter or a district, are required to demonstrate how they are increasing or improving services for those targeted student groups, right? When we talk about increasing, that means to grow services in quantity. You may have something that's been successful, so you're going to add it to more school sites, or you're going to add it to your own school that you're working with. And to improve means that we're going to improve it and grow it in quality. All right. So perhaps we're trying something out, it's not working well, we're going to try to improve it. The LEA demonstrates this not only through the information they provide, but specifically in their actions and metrics that they put into their LCAP. Right. So I did have a look at the LCAPs of the spotlights from today, and they had done a great job at having an action that really does describe this work so that it is not placed on individual people, but on services. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So you may think about like, what does this mean for you, and how can you think about your alignment? So there's a tool that you'll find that's linked here and also in your resource page that lets you start exploring the priorities. And I wanted just to clarify some language. These priorities can be put in any goal of the LCAP, right? So it's local control. So, we may have 3 goals. One is like academic success, one is social emotional learning, one is engaging parents. It's really up to the district or charter school to identify which goals. All right. So what we're going to be focusing on here is the priority. So how does your work align with the priority? So we talked a little bit about basic services, that you are part of that residency program. How does it align with that priority? How can it be measured? We have a couple of examples of local metrics that were shared, as well as that last column is it focusing on English learners, foster youth, and low income, and how is it increasing or improving services, right? So this kind of work can be done prior to having that information when you start going to unions, when you start going to engaging educational partners forums or town hall meetings, what have you. You could have this idea, say, yeah, my work aligns with priority 4 academic outcomes or what have you. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so in terms of a timeline, in fall and winter, usually the school district, the school sites will have an educational partner engagement plan. And we really promote like a really wide variety of ways that educational partners can engage in LCAP work. Some do surveys, some may do like advisory committees such as School Site Council or ELAC. Some may do focus groups, like we're really talking to our districts about on charter schools, how can we get experiential data from our students and parents by doing empathy interviews or by having focus group conversations with students. So how can we hear from a wide variety of educational partners? That usually starts happening within fall and winter. At least the plan is in place. Sometimes what happens is that after winter break, then there's a big kickoff to start doing this work, right? So keep your ear to the ground. Think about find out from your district or school site to find out when these are happening. It'd be great for you to attend so you can start hearing and start being a part of the conversation. In terms of mid-year update, there's a mid-year report presentation that has to happen before February 28th at all districts and charter schools. I recommend going to that board meeting, listening in. What are they saying about their progress? They have to present local governing board the outcome data and expenditures, as well as implementation data at that. Ongoing in the springtime is when the developing of the LCAP and the revisions are being made, so that all that data that we've collected through surveys, focus groups, empathy interviews are now consolidated and helps you develop the goals and actions and services that you're going to provide. And then finally, the drop dead date is on or before July 1st. The LCAP must be adopted from the district or charter school, and then we get it by that July 1st, and then we do our review, and then we work with the district to make sure that it's approvable, ready to go, and then they get the green light that their LCAP plan is in place. So with that, yeah, it's a lot of information,
Yes.
and I went over by 3 minutes. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of information there. But I want you to know that I'm available to help out and to talk through any of this information as well. Plus, if you want to spend a couple of minutes just asking me specific questions, I'm here for that too.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah, for all those great ideas. And yes, we will have some time for reflection on what we just heard. Before that reflection, are there any clarifying questions? We have a couple minutes for Deborah if you do have any clarifying thoughts or questions that you might have. Okay, well, we'll continue our thinking and processing all that great information. Thank you again, Deborah,
You're welcome.
for elaborating more on our thoughts and providing us with some very valuable information. I think we'll go next to our reflection. And we have these two questions for you to guide your thoughts here. And so the two questions on your screen, you can answer one or both. We will do this as a whole group, so we invite you to unmute, or if you feel more comfortable in the chat, we'll definitely be monitoring that as well. So first question is, what might be possible in your own district or program given what you've heard today? And where do you see alignment or potential alignment between residency work and your LCAP goals? So take a few minutes. Again, we invite you to share your thoughts in the chat or definitely unmute. We're happy to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to hear what's standing out to you.
One thing that stood out for me, Javier, I'll just share because it's something I've been thinking about, and Deborah called out was that critical piece of parent engagement, um, and of it, like in attending the meetings where LCAP is being approved and discussed. I think that's an area that I think has been overlooked, and there is a gap. You know, parents oftentimes run so much of what initiatives and what happens in a district, and really bringing them in as partners, as a collaborative partner, just like you would the union, to really put yourselves in a position to move this work forward. I think is something that I think didn't think about previously, but I think we could begin to encourage that here and find ways to support that. I think that's really important.
There's a question in the chat box that I'd like to respond to. Thank you, Tina, for calling out on the conversation about data points and how do you connect it through specific targeted student groups such as homeless or foster youth. So really, I'm thinking in terms of is your work increasing or improving services for all students, and specifically, is there a way to align it to work on homeless and foster youth? What we find many times is disaggregating data and having disaggregated data in the LCAP, right? So if you're saying like I really align to priority 4 student outcomes, ELA or mathematics, and then you disaggregate by specific student groups like homeless or foster youth, you can track data that way, right? It could be the number of support sessions that are in place to support the students. It could be the number of professional development that's provided for everyone to become aware of the needs of specific student groups. So there's a lot of ways to add that data. What we shared in the 3 different areas, the 3 big buckets, is the requirements for state measures. But as you saw from your spotlights, you can utilize local measures as well. Like you can utilize the local measure to measure outcome and impact.
Excellent. Any other final thoughts or reflection from the group? Okay, great. I think I'll turn it over to you, Heather.
Wonderful. Thanks again so much, Deborah. Such a powerful just testimony again to making this connection between LCAP and residency work. And I did want to follow that up with, again, where do you see alignment? Where do you see your next steps? And I just want to really encourage you to go to our resources page, navigate towards our program folders, to your program folder, depending on the region that you are visiting from. Get into your planning tool and spend some time while this information is fresh and while you have it in your mind and while you're thinking, okay, what would be my next step? Even if your next step is to reach out to your co-partner at your IHE, your LEA, just one small thing that you can record to move this work forward and to kind of take action on all the information that you downloaded today in your mind while you're thinking about it. So really encourage you to get over to that planning tool, especially standard 3, operational sustainability, and kind of document some of the things that you're thinking about, some of the moves that you want to take next, so that when you revisit it in with your co-coordinator or with your coach or with your hub lead, you know exactly where to take action and exactly where the direction is that you want to move. You don't lose any steam on that. And so I really encourage you to do that. In line with that, is that opportunity that we all have, of course, is a coaching request, coaching from SR Tech, SR Tech Hub, or a lab coach is absolutely free. Just want to remind you, and it's open and available to all residency programs and all levels of implementation. You can submit a request by scanning this QR code, or the link to the request is there in the PowerPoint as well. So maybe you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so much. You're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all the different information that you received today, all the different kind of residency programs that we showcased, and you're like, I'm not sure what my next move is. Scanning this code, accessing that link, and getting in space with your hub lead or your TRL coach is a great way to take that next step and take action on some of the information that we shared with you today. So I really want to encourage you to do that. And then one of the last things would love for you to do is to fill out our feedback form. It is here for you to fill it out, and we're going to give you a couple minutes actually now to fill that out. I will share with you that all of our offerings and all of the things that we create for the residency field are largely informed by our feedback survey data. And so anytime that you can take to fill that out, we really appreciate it, because that's what we look over when we think, okay, what are we going to do next year? How can we reframe this differently? What can we offer that we haven't already offered? And so please take some time to do that. I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes to give you some time just to fill that out now before we leave and before we send you off. Okay, I'm going to pull you back. Hopefully you had a chance to fill that out. We're so grateful for any feedback we get. And I'm going to pass it to you, Amy.
Yes, I'll close us out. As we're wrapping up today, we just wanted to give you a quick preview, a reminder of what's coming up next. So our next convening is scheduled for January 26th in the new year. We'll be focusing on leveraging paid LEA roles for residents. We'll look at how districts are creating staffing structures to benefit their candidates. And you'll get to hear directly from field experts, kind of like today, who've implemented a range of staffing models and learn what's worked for them in practice. And we'll build in plenty of time for implementation support so you can think through what these models could look like in your own district or in your own partnership, and what adjustments might be needed to, need to be made in order to make them sustainable. And then I do just want to highlight quickly that registration is open for our spring site learning tours. Matt gave us a plug there at the beginning. Those are happening on Monday, February 2nd, and this event is entirely free. There is no cost associated to join us. This year we have 4 host locations to choose from. So Hemet Unified, Humboldt County Office of Education, Monterey Peninsula Unified, and Lindsay Unified. And each site will offer a unique opportunity to kind of see their residency programs in action and learn directly from what's working for them. And if you haven't signed up already, you can visit the SRTAC website events tab to do so. And our one-page kind of resource document has a link to the website there for you. But other than that, we just want to thank you again for your time and engagement today, and we look forward to seeing you again in January. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you so much for joining. See you all at the next one.